Every Fortune 500 company has to start somewhere, and Steve Case is trying to make sure that somewhere isn't just New York and California. Steve Case, who founded AOL, the first internet company to go public back in 1992, is now the chairman and CEO of the investment firm Revolution. Revolution is behind Rise of the Rest, which has been traveling the country by bus. Steve Case joins us now. You've been going around all these different towns. What kinds of startups do you think that the places you've been visiting that are outside of the coast, what are they going to be most successful at?
Well, first of all, we started this initiative several years ago. So far, we've visited 40 different cities. We just announced recently we're going to head to 4 cities in Florida in a couple of months, and also Puerto Rico. And we found in all these cities there's remarkable entrepreneurs building great companies, but there's not as much of a spotlight, a media spotlight on them. And it's much harder to raise the venture capital to start and scale the companies. Last year, 75% of venture capital went to just 3 states, California, New York, and Massachusetts. Florida, which is the 3rd largest state, got less than 2%. Yet we're already seeing some big successes there. A company called Chewy.com got acquired for $3 billion in Florida. Also, Magic Leap has raised nearly $2 billion from Google and Alibaba. They're outside of Miami. So there's more and more of these examples. I think in this 3rd wave of the internet, when you're starting to think about healthcare and food and agriculture and smart cities, that's where the expertise in the middle of the country, places like Pittsburgh because of robotics, or Lincoln or St. Louis because of ag tech farming, or many of the great medical institutions around the country in places like Cleveland and Minnesota and Baltimore. That's where I think there's a real opportunity for these entrepreneurs, but only if we pay attention to them, only if we back them, only if they can win the battle for talent and the battle for capital and the battle for attention.
Now, Steve, something else I know Revolution has been involved in is the economic opportunity zones, which have been cropping up across the country. Back in June, you guys announced you'd be making some investments there. It's been about 6-7 months since that news first came out. I mean, how much progress have you made there? How much of an opportunity, I guess, do you see in this specific tax structure? Of course, you have to be invested, I think it's for 20 years, and then afterwards you have some sort of tax benefit on the back end of that.
Well, there's really a couple of different things. We put together a Rise the Rest seed fund to invest in companies just a little over a year ago, and 40 quite prominent entrepreneurs, people like Jeff Bezos and Howard Schultz, and executives like Eric Schmidt and Meg Whitman, and venture capitalists like John Doerr and Jim Breyer, and private equity folks like Ray Dalio and David Rubenstein are all part of this as investors alongside it. That fund has made over 100 investments in over 50 cities so far, seed investments. Separately, what we're referencing, as we announced in the summer, a couple of people are joining us from a real estate company, Hines, to look at the whole opportunity zone. And we haven't really locked on our strategy there, but we do think it's a big opportunity. I was a fan and was lobbied in favor of the idea of opportunity zones in the last few years, because that too can attract more of the capital from the coast, paying attention to what's happening in the middle of the country, whether it be investing in companies that are creating jobs, or investing in real estate that can build out some of the startup infrastructure, co-working space and mixed use and so forth, that can fuel a lot of these startup communities in these cities all across the country.
Hey, Steve, Andy Serwer here. I wanted to ask you, taking a step back, ask you about consumer internet. And of course, we said you founded AOL, went public back in '92. 20 years later, a whole new crop of social media companies like Facebook, Twitter, et cetera, are out there. It seems like, though, that the era of the consumer internet is over in terms of innovation. I mean, it's very hard to start a vertical because of giants like Amazon snapping everything up, or Facebook, or Google for that matter. Are you seeing any innovation in the consumer internet, or is it all B2B now?
No, we are in the consumer internet, and I should say not just in tech. Some of the great entrepreneurial companies are in other sectors. We've invested, for example, in some fast casual concepts like Sweet Green and Kava that are growing rapidly. In Detroit, we invested in Chinola that makes watches and leather products and other kinds of things. So as we think about entrepreneurship, think about startups, we can't just think about Silicon Valley. We also just can't think about classic tech startups. I think innovation in the next 10 or 20 years is when tech meets kind of the real world, meets everyday life. And that's going to require more of a hybrid set of skills. But it is fair to say that some of the big companies now, Facebook and so forth, it is more difficult to compete with them. There's not a lot of venture capital that's going to go into creating a competitor to one of them, because they are pretty well entrenched. They have pretty high barriers to entry, and that probably does chill some of the innovation. I know here in Washington, people are looking at that, whether it be antitrust issues or privacy issues. I think that will be a key part of the debate here in the next year or two. But when we talk about entrepreneurship entrepreneurship, really trying to celebrate all kinds of entrepreneurs doing all kinds of things in all kinds of places, just not the usual entrepreneurs doing the usual kinds of things in places like Silicon Valley.
When I think about the innovation economy and different cities, it's amazing how one company can make such a big difference in a city. Take like Dell in Austin or Microsoft in Seattle. I'm wondering, do you think that Amazon missed an opportunity with HQ2 by picking New York and DC?
Yeah, a little bit. I think the fact that they kind of put it out for bid and 238 cities applied for it, it was a good thing, and got a lot of cities focused on innovation, focused on startups. The message I've delivered to a lot of the mayors I've talked to from many of the cities that lost is if they keep the momentum going, they keep the coalition together, they keep driving the collaboration locally, and they take even half of the energy they put into making their Amazon bid and half of the money they put on the table to try to attract Amazon and refocused it on their own startup community, they might have the capacity to create the next Amazon. So hopefully that will be the case. Obviously, since we started AOL in Northern Virginia, not far from the site that Amazon picked here, and I've lived here now more than 3 decades, I was not that surprised that this was one of their sites. I think that did kind of make sense. I was a little more surprised around New York. I would have preferred some of the other cities, although Nashville did get a consolation prize, 5,000 jobs in Nashville. And more companies, Facebook, Google, are also opening offices in places like Pittsburgh and Ann Arbor and many other parts of the country. So I think we're starting to see innovation disperse, big companies recognizing they need second, third, fourth offices. And the dynamic 20 years ago, venture capitalists say, unless you move to Silicon Valley, we won't invest in you. That's less true now, and hopefully will not be true at all 10 years from now.
We have to go, but I want to put you on the spot. What city would you have picked?
Since we've backed 40 different cities through the fund, it's kind of like having children.
Come on.
We're supporting all of them. But I should say in closing, I hope the entrepreneurs in Florida, the 4 cities there, the Space Coast, Tampa Bay, Orlando, Miami, and also San Juan, Puerto Rico. Any entrepreneurs there, go to the Rise to Rest site, apply to pitch. We hope to see you on the road.
He likes Florida.
Steve Case, thanks so much.